And so, again, as we talk more, there's a real scope for India to be the breadbasket for the world in the category. And we're looking forward to helping build that.
Awesome. So, since you have been in the CPG business for quite some time now, so while addressing, what are those key questions that the mainstream buyers have really asked you while sourcing products from India?
Absolutely. So as I alluded to, India has this incredible potential. It's very rich agriculturally. Our government has done a lot of good things in keeping GMOs at bay, and therefore the biodiversity here is amazing. So everyone looks to India to source and to find good ingredients. The challenge that the international market has typically faced in the past, and I faced this, right, when I came back, is we have had bad actors and bad apples. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. And companies that have done the wrong thing in the past have burned relationships with companies internationally. And then when people look at India, once bitten, twice shy, you look at the market and say, do I trust the person? How do I trust the person? How do I validate this? And that relationship takes time to build. And so what we decided to do right from day one is follow very ethical practices and just work through it to establish that trust with customers. It was never about a single transaction, right? It was always about building long-lasting relationships. So the first thing I think that Indian companies will face is a bit of well-placed, or maybe now not so well-placed, because there are a lot of good actors as well, but suspicion in terms of how an international buyer will look at an Indian company. And they have to work through that. And with, I would like to say with companies like ours, Touchwood, which are doing the right things, we're changing that perception in the market, but it's going to take a lot of work.
Hi Chirag, good afternoon. How are you?
Hi Dhawal, good afternoon. I'm doing very well. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining in. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Hi viewers, good afternoon. Welcome to the new episode of Sustainable Future Food Talk. Today we have with us Chirag Sabunani from Pune. He is a graduate from Kellogg School of Management. He is the founder of O-Grade Foods and Supplant Foods that helps various market relationships for partners in North America, Europe, and Australia. They have developed a unique technology to cost-effectively deflavor plant-based raw materials while augmenting protein functions, foams, emulsions, and gels. Chirag is also a certified personal trainer from National Academy of Sports Medicine. So Chirag, great profile, having been studied in Kellogg School. So how does it feel, and what made you come into this field?
Absolutely. Thanks for the kind introduction, though. I'll share a little bit more as we go, but it's a really exciting time to be in the space. Honestly, I got into it because it was a labor of love. I graduated in material science. I'm a material scientist. So I really fell in love with the science and intricacies of how food came together. And when I first got into the industry, there wasn't too much innovation happening. You go back a few years, you won't really find food innovation being a buzzword. And then all of a sudden, Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, Just Egg, they all storm onto the scene. And now food is a really exciting area for innovation. And it ties in very nicely with what I had studied and what we were doing, which eventually became this business around advanced food ingredients, where it's not just the technology that is relating to plant-based proteins and flours, but it's also other ingredients like gum systems, fiber systems, starches, so on and so forth. And we're very fortunate that we're in India because we have such an abundance of different and interesting raw materials. Yes. And so, again, as we talk more, there's a real scope for India to be the breadbasket for the world in the category. And we're looking forward to helping build that.
Awesome. So, since you have been in the CPG business for quite some time now, so while addressing, what are those key questions that the mainstream buyers have really asked you while sourcing products from India?
Absolutely. So as I alluded to, India has this incredible potential. It's very rich agriculturally. Our government has done a lot of good things in keeping GMOs at bay, and therefore the biodiversity here is amazing. So everyone looks to India to source and to find good ingredients. The challenge that the international market has typically faced in the past, and I faced this, right, when I came back, is we have had bad actors and bad apples. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. And companies that have done the wrong thing in the past have burned relationships with companies internationally. And then when people look at India, once bitten, twice shy, you look at the market and say, do I trust the person? How do I trust the person? How do I validate this? And that relationship takes time to build. And so what we decided to do right from day one is follow very ethical practices and just work through it to establish that trust with customers. It was never about a single transaction, right? It was always about building long-lasting relationships. So the first thing I think that Indian companies will face is a bit of well-placed, or maybe now not so well-placed, because there are a lot of good actors as well, but suspicion in terms of how an international buyer will look at an Indian company. And they have to work through that. And with, I would like to say with companies like ours, Touchwood, which are doing the right things, we're changing that perception in the market, but it's going to take a lot of work. And we have to do this as an industry collectively.
Awesome. You have made a very right point here around ethics, because this is something that is very fundamental, but that only really helps you build long term in the international market, which is
right.
Awesome.
For us, for instance, when we started, our first transaction took literally 2 years to come together, because we have to work through the cultural barriers. And that's despite the fact that I've lived in the West, right? I know how they work and how our buyers think. So the first transaction took almost 2 years, but we were determined and we were at it. And once that's happened, things have just scaled wonderfully well. But we also recognize that process. Now, for us as a team, we don't really want to get into a market where we're going to invest that kind of energy for a single transaction. It doesn't make sense. We're willing to put in that time, and therefore we want to have that long-term success with our partners. And we want them to be successful too. That is the mindset that's needed. And we're finding more Indian companies adapting to that mindset. I think the difference also in the domestic market is it's a little bit of, as the Hindi term goes, mauke pe chauka. And that doesn't exist in the international market, right? It is one of those things where it's a long-term win.
I so agree with you. So, Chirag, with your expertise, your expertise has been in innovative food ingredients development. And if you could share with the audience some few important points to be kept in mind while developing products for the West.
Sure. So this is an interesting point, because the dynamics of the market have certain differences, but also certain similarities. When we look at the Western market, I think people are much more willing to try something innovative, in addition to being tolerant of a product not being perfect. And so it's a great place within which to develop and experiment with a few new things. Of course, keeping in mind the first point, right, which is you have to deliver. You must deliver on a customer's desires and expectations, but people are more willing to allocate R&D time to go through that process and say, does it work? Does it not work? If it works, are we willing to put in a little bit of a small launch to see where it can go? India is a little bit different. India is a lot more traditional when it comes to looking at food. And only now are we seeing companies like Epigamia and some of the others or ID Fresh that are breaking the mold. But even if you look at them breaking the mold, they are still breaking it in a very traditional context, right? Like Epigamia doing yogurt, it's just a convenience solution. And ID Fresh is doing a convenience solution, but they're not pushing the envelope, right? They're not saying, well, bulletproof coffee, we tried something in Tibet and we think it's better and we found the science. And so now we're going to take milk out of coffee and put butter in there, right? So that's the kind of thing where you will find that more innovative approach in the West, I feel, and you're beginning to see a little bit more convenience-driven innovation in India. So the kinds of solutions that one would develop for, whether it's on an ingredient side or whether it's in terms of changing the product that the consumer is eating, will start to differ a bit. And I can't take names because of NDAs, but we are working with some of the largest Indian companies as well, and they are beginning to put together their plans of how the next generation of Indian food would look, very similar to what the innovation that's happening in Europe and North America. So the transition is on, but it's important to recognize the dynamics of the market and play within it. I'm not speaking about price yet.
Right.
Price is the other variable where I think everybody wants a really good price, and that's important to respect and maintain.
Right.
But there are markets where people, because of their earning capacity, are willing to pay more. And so, it's another variable that is an important consideration that plays in the background, but I don't think it's the primary consideration. I think you can build a successful brand or product here, even with expensive market, but it's about expensive ingredients, but it's about catering to the deeper nuances of where people are thinking.
Sure. So coming down to my next question, with your extensive experience in procurement, what tips do you have for a growing brand, having, of course, a promising portfolio and wishes to enter an international market?
Sure. So I think that I'd like to break that question into two parts, right? The first is on the ingredient side, and the second part is for a brand itself that's looking to grow, both ingredients and finished products. So on the ingredient side, right now, just secure your supply chain. Secure your supply chain wherever you are. And if you're having some issues, talk to us. We might be able to help you depending on what ingredient you're working on, because our factories are also pretty much running on full tilt. But talk to whoever your partners are and secure your supply chain. That's the first thing. When it comes to growing your presence, whether internationally, globally, or even domestically, I think it's really important to understand the dynamics of the market you're looking to enter. So for instance, if we look at the grocery market in North America, it's about $1 trillion a year. And if we look at the grocery market in India, it's also probably about $1 trillion a year, because the paying capacity over here is much lower, but the population is also much bigger. So what does it take to be successful in each of those markets? Well, in North America, if you want to succeed, you literally need to have 5 successful conversations that will put you in 50% of the market, because you will get into the top retailers and they control the presence in the market. So you have a brilliant product, you work through the system, and you have that success. In India, to get access to 50% of the market, you're probably going to have more than 10,000 conversations, right? So the place where the power is controlled in the market is a little bit different depending on where it is. And it's important to recognize that and then work towards that. And these are not quick journeys. These are journeys where you have to set your strategic focus. You have to invest in it. You have to get your investors aligned, your products aligned, depending on what it is. Again, I won't take names, but just think of an Indian company that has massive distribution in India, right? They could put anything in their distribution channel and it would work, because they're pushing it onto the market and the market doesn't have any option. But now think about North America, where there's a retailer who controls 25% of the grocery market. If your product isn't working and consumers are not picking it up, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to chuck it out. So that's the success around a brand. And around ingredients, of course, fundamentally, it's about understanding where the trends are, finding out the pain points for manufacturers, seeing how to work with them. And then again, there's just this, it's really important to build trust, have those relationships, and be there for your customer when they need you. I think one thing people forget when it comes to brands are a little bit different. But when it comes to ingredients, it's a little bit of being there for your partners. If they run into a bit of an issue and they can call you and say, we need this, and you're willing to make it happen for them, the next time somebody approaches them with an ingredient that looks the same on a spec sheet, they're going to think, probably not. I have too much of a relationship here. So I think that's really important. We do that, and I see that a lot of our ingredients also are designed to solve challenges and problems. That's the other variable in this, right? If you just have something that looks like something else on a spec sheet, but then the customer gets a sample, or you even match the sample, but then your production isn't up to spec, and then you deliver the product and the customer looks at it, don't do that because it spoils it for everyone else. You're never going to get a repeat order and you've just spoiled it, right? So, don't waste your time doing that. If you're going to do something, do it well.
This is such an important, you talked about, so you previously also mentioned about how important is it for you to make your partner successful, and that's how your success also gets aligned. So I think this is really a critical point, and of course the market dynamics are something which of course depends on geography to geography, but that plays a critical role.
Absolutely.
So, Chirag, this is quite a personal question, but I mean, you have been an entrepreneur and doing extremely well. So, how important is it to exercise every day, and how do you practice it in your life? If you inspire fellow entrepreneurs.
Sure. So, I mean, I don't exercise every day, right? I think that's overworking your body, but you want to exercise 5 to 6 times a week. It's very important for, at least for me, for your mind and body to be in a good place, in a good state, because it goes back to traditional wisdom, right? Within a healthy body resides a healthy mind. So I keep a pretty rigorous routine across different types of movements and different types of activities that I do. I absolutely love it, and I'm grateful that the business is now. It has been in a place for some years and is now even more so in a place where I have the freedom to pursue those activities.
Lovely. Coming down to my next question. So of course, this is just the first month of 22, and so you must have also set some goals for yourself. So maybe if you can mention one personal and one professional.
Sure. So personal goal to be in the best shape that I've been in my entire life. I think this year, especially with COVID going on, I think there were a number of people that were really, I mean, a lot of people were impacted. Everyone was kind of impacted, right? I mean, even for us, when it came to some of our new ingredients and new lines, we were finding that a lot of R&D projects with our customers were getting furloughed and pushed back because of the staffing issues and so on. So, you can take it in a good way, you can take it in a bad way. I think, I personally took it in a good way and just really focused on things that were in my control. And as part of that, this year, what is again in my control in a different aspect of life is to get into the best shape that I want to be in. And to reflect on that in a professional context, as we've seen more success, touch wood, it's important for us also to keep building out our team in order to service customers that aren't the biggest. I think, our core team is now focusing a little bit more on much larger customers. It's just the nature of the business, right? If we don't see substantial enough of a price in the long term from a specific customer, we will eventually not want to focus over there as much. So it's important for us to build out the team to service the smaller customers who do keep coming to us, and that's an important. It's an important thing for us. I mean, going right back to my first statement, right? You have to be there for your customers, and we don't want to turn people away. So that's what we're doing.
Interesting. So thank you so much for this. Coming down to my last question for this session. So, I mean, how do you foresee the changing food landscape of the US market with, of course, the penetration of plant-based foods?
Sure. There's a lot happening in the US food market all the time. It's a very innovative space. I mean, categories like gluten-free and keto are also there. A lot of buzz, excitement, and energy has been generated within the plant-based space. And as we look at it, there is a major transition happening. You can find it all the way from the large food companies that are putting eggs in this basket, looking at where the change is going to happen, through to consumer behavior, the advent of new brands. What we do believe, however, is that we're at a little bit of a fork in the road, or we can see a fork in the road that's coming out. And as we approach that fork, supply chains are under more and more pressure because on the ingredient side, the innovation has not happened to the correct degree that will allow us to take the fork in the road where the food system will transition completely away from slaughter. And the reason that we are excited about plant-based ingredients and we focus over there and continue innovating is because we believe in certain pathways to get to the fork where we end slaughter. That's one of my life goals, is to support the movement to end slaughter. And so in that process, we believe that ingredients need to be just as tasty, just as nutritious and affordable, more affordable than animal-based foods, in order for us to make that transition. And the healthy aspect or nutritious aspect is a very loaded question, right? Which is going to take some time to make that transition. So as we look at the fork that we're heading towards, we need to drive that innovation. Consumers in those markets read labels, understand processes, do their research.
Right.
And as a consequence of this, they will ask the difficult questions. It's, again, not a market where you can just push it onto the market and say, okay, have it. No, people will ask those questions. And so we need to drive that ingredient innovation. And we've got some stuff happening that I cannot speak about in public, but we have things that are happening to get us to the point where we take we can keep pushing it out into the future, but why push it out when you can develop the innovation? So we will take that direction as a global food system. And I'm happy to see that happening. So the transition will happen. It's just a question of where are we at in that transition? Do we need a little bit more time? And until it happens, do people take the other fork?
Right. And I remember you also mentioned about you also have those ingredients which are, let's say, problem solving ingredients, right? And that's what, as you rightly mentioned, the consumers are looking for that. It's not just you come up with any Me Too product and the customer will buy it.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example which might be useful for listeners as well. So the big demon in plant-based meats right now is methyl cellulose, and everyone's looking to get methyl cellulose out. And we are very close to having a natural fiber that replaces methyl cellulose 100%. It already replaces methyl cellulose to quite an extent, but you cannot get 100% of it out. But we're close to having that point where it will replace it 100%. Now, all of a sudden, you're taking a modified cellulose, which is not viewed out as clean, and replacing it with a natural fiber, which has a positive label connotation. Because if you look at US food regulators, they're talking about the fact that people are now not deficient in protein, they're deficient in fiber. And so now you can have your plant-based burger, which tastes like a burger and is not just as nutritious as a burger, it's more nutritious because you're getting fiber out of it.
Right.
So, and the chemical was out. So this is the kind of work where we've already got a number of solutions that are out there. And this is one of the ones which is just about to make its presence.
Right. And fiber, I think, as a nutrient also, it is really helpful to reduce obesity, right? Because obesity is one of the biggest problems in the West, especially, of course, in the US. So
it can be, especially the fiber that we are speaking of, because it creates a sense of being satiated. And if you're satiated, you won't want to eat more necessarily. So it's more complex than that in terms of how we solve obesity. But yes, this is likely to help. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Chirag. The kind of responses which you gave are really practical, and you talked a lot about innovation as well. So thank you so much once again for
my pleasure,
and really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. And I look forward to connecting with some of the other listeners as well on this.
Sure. Thank you so much once again.
Thanks, Dhawal.